underway.
Kaya nga, humingi kami ng tulong sa ating National IATF na kung pwede ho sana because our hospital care utilization is almost full. Halos puno na yung aming mga hospital. Yung aming mga healthcare workers ay humihingi na ng time out. No? Bali sila ay pagod na rin.
The OCTA research group believes that there are more Delta cases present in the country than what is being reported by the government.
This is the situation in the Philippines based on sampling. So this is not the actual number of the Delta variant. But what we know is that the limited genome sequencing that we have account for just 100 samples per day out of around 8,000 cases that we have now. So that's less than 2% of the total number of cases.
The role of science in fighting the pandemic cannot be discounted, but because of its importance in helping government making decisions in the pandemic response, is it right to question the role of scientists in public health policy? We discuss in this episode of The Chiefs. Welcome to this special edition of The Chiefs. Ako po si Roboy Alampay. Also with us, Ami Pamituan of the Philippine Star, Lucy Cruz Valdez of News 5, and Ed Lingao of One News. Chiefs, good evening.
Good evening.
Ami.
Good evening. Happy Wednesday. It's
Happy
hump day.
Wednesday. Ami, ano ba binabate natin mga balita?
Very happy. Alam niyo naman na 9 regions na daw ang Delta variant ngayon. Well, baka meron tayong good news kahit papano dun sa Olympics na within golfers. Yun lang good news.
Oo, sa golf, medyo lumalaban pa tayo. It's only the first day, of course. A lot of things could happen over 3 more rounds. Pagkatapos bukas, mga boxers natin. Sige. Let's go on to our conversation now. We begin tonight with Congresswomen Bernadette Herrera-D of Bagong Henerasyon Party List, Sharon Garin of Ambis OA Party List, and Quezon City 4th District Congressman Bong Suntay. Good evening, Congressman and Congresswomen.
Good evening po.
Good evening, sir. Good evening. Good evening. Good evening.
I'll just throw this out there. Bahala na kayo kung sinong gustong maunang sumagot. No? But we of course got you here because there's this resolution calling for a probe, particularly on OCTA research. The way it was reported kanina sa big story, you wanna look into the methodologies, the qualifications, and the ties. So let's start with this. Why a congressional inquiry, and what do you hope to achieve here?
Well, the only thing that we want to achieve is clarity. Because there's confusion. Currently, because of the situation, people are already scared. People are already scared. They're confused. And if there are different pronouncements coming from the government and, of course, from the private sector who wishes to help the government, it creates more confusion. Kasi there's conflicting data between the DOH and OCTA. What we want to know is what methodology is being used by OCTA? What methodology is being used by the DOH? Who has a better methodology based on past statistics? Because if we could determine who has a better methodology or means of gathering data, then let's use it so that there's unison in what we pronounce. Dahil, as I mentioned, alam mo, takot na yung tao eh. And every time there's a pronouncement, people panic, people react.
Okay, Congressman, if you don't mind, but I think, let me just try to anticipate what people may be thinking here. One is, if there's confusion in policy, isn't that the problem of government? And then secondly, if there is confusion in the interpretation of data, who are you proposing to be the referee here and to be the authority to say who has the better methodology? Congressmen?
No. That's it. That's why we want to call for an investigation. We'll invite OCTA, we'll invite DOH. in order to determine what methodology is currently being used. Alam mo kami dito sa Congress, we're not scientists, we're not doctors, but we're policy makers. So it will help us determine what to legislate and to give direction also to our national government agency. Siguro ang mali dito, maybe some sectors are viewing it, we want to discredit OCTA. No, that's the farthest thing from our mind. We don't want to discredit anyone. What we want to do is, we're in this boat together. And we want everyone to get their acts together. Let's all try to help one another, di ba? In finding a solution, in giving our people peace of mind, and in facing this pandemic.
Ako naman,
Pero
bakit
Congressman-
po ngayon? Bakit po ngayon?
Sandali.
I mean,
Wait, Lucy, si
Yeah.
Congresswoman Bernadette
Yeah,
Herrera-D.
I'd like to add lang, kasi we also want, dapat pag nagpo-pronounce ka, may specifics ka rin na sinasabi, hindi yung general lang, the cases went up like that. When you say the cases are up, ano ba yan, severe, mild, anong klase? Kasi nag-instill ka ng fear sa mga tao, pero kailangan mong tignan, dun sa number of cases, ilan ba doon ang nag-recover? Ang taas ng recovery rate ng ating bansa. So, pero pag sinasabi mo, cases are rising, what kind of cases are rising? So, ito yung sinasabi namin that we should also be responsible kung ano yung nilalabas mo sa public. Ang problema kasi, naglalabas sila sa public na hindi nila kino-compare with the data of government. Siyempre, we don't want to control the flow of information, pero we should also be more responsible as to the flow of information that's going out because it instills panic to the Filipino people, especially kung very general statements ang nilalabas natin.
Pero
Ngayon lang naman yung atin.
ang sinasabi
Are you just
actually breaching their, ang OCTA kasi is projecting di ba yung possibilities, mathematical projections yan And they are actually using, and I don't think it has been disputed by DOH, they're actually using data of the DOH. Tapos hindi sabi lang ng OCTA, ito yung nakikita namin magiging potential trend. At saka ang problema kasi, ang problema siguro ng gobyerno ngayon, yung mga projections ng OCTA since the start of the pandemic have mostly been on spot, no? They predicted the surge, yung mga pagtaas based on, according to them, based on DOH data. Projections siya. In fact, nung umpisa, ang sinasabi nila, nung umpisa, ang akala nga namin ano ba yan, para kayong mga manghuhula. They had to correct us na hindi kami nanguhula. We are basing it on data that we
Provided
get
by
from
the DOH. Yeah.
And if you recall, even DOH also and some experts of DOH are saying, may mali doon sa methodology nila because they're using the 2 weeks na past na hindi na accurate yung projection nila. Kinontra din yun ng DOH. That's why gusto natin silang tawagin kasi nagko-conflict yung mga statements nila. At the end of the day, ang nalilito yung taong bayan.
Yeah, Ami, kagaya ng sinabi ni Congresswoman BH, because yung infectious disease expert natin, si Dr. Edgar Salvania also said na, I think the data being used is inaccurate. And syempre, we don't want to take it on face value. That's why we want to determine that and give both sides a chance. I-present nila. If Dr. Salvania is saying it's inaccurate, we want to know why. If OCTA is saying accurate yung data namin, we want to know why. We want to listen to both sides so that, ano naman kami dito we're not siding with everyone. In fact, we want to support who has the right data. But we want to understand. As I mentioned earlier, we're not doctors here, we're not scientists here. But when we make policy, we have to base it on facts. And these people, alam ko naman that everyone wants to help our country. We're facing a pandemic, and I believe that everyone feels that they want to contribute in trying to find the solution. We also want to find the solution. But, kasi as Congresswoman BH said, once you make pronouncement, and this is heard by millions of the Filipino people, there's a reaction. And when there's a reaction coming from our constituency, there's also a reaction coming from both the local government unit and the national government, because people will say, "Uy, ano ba ginagawa nyo? Wala kayong ginagawa. Sinabi ng OCTA, magkakasurge. Ano ba ginagawa nyo?" So we want to, we
Yes,
want
sir.
to have accurate data so that our reactions then and the policies, the legislations we make would also be, will also be in tune
Yes, sir.
with
Pero
what
sir,
we need.
didn't government just uphold the findings of OCTA research when they recommended a circuit-breaking lockdown, and government gave an ECQ for 2 weeks? Doesn't that show at the very least that example of OCTA's
No,
recommendations being followed?
That's an example of a reaction. Nung naglabas ng statement yung OCTA, ang ginawa ng ating Metro Manila mayors is, okay, o sinabi ng there's a data coming from OCTA that there will be a surge. So
Yeah.
kailangan meron tayong circuit breaker. So 2 weeks 2 weeks lockdown. Yun yung naging resulta niyan. And you know that 2 week lockdown will cost 172,000 employees in Metro Manila. It will cost them their jobs.
Yes, sir. But it was affirmed by the IATF, which includes the DOH. So in the end, the MMC was only recommendatory. It was in the end the DOH and the IATF.
No. When the Metro Manila mayors decided, kagaya lagi sinasabi ni Pangulong Duterte, it's up to the local chief executive to decide kung anong gusto nilang mangyari. So when there was already a pronouncement coming from the Metro Manila Council na okay, there will be a 2 week lockdown, the national government supported it.
Congressman, let me bring in
But ang
Congresswoman.
problema natin ngayon, sabi ko, what we're facing now is not only a health problem. It's also an economic problem.
Yes.
It's also a mental health issue. Not just yung COVID-19 issue. Tali-tali na yan.
Yeah,
Data would show you that there are more deaths by suicide rather than deaths by the COVID-19 pandemic. Yung mental
I
upsurge,
think there's
but we're not addressing it.
Congressman, let me bring in Congresswoman Sharon Garin. Congresswoman, kanina sabi ni Dr. Beverly Ho, one of the experts advising also our government, she said, look, ito lang naman trabaho ng DOH. We provide the data. And we provide the data precisely so that researchers or even citizens can take their own stab at analyzing it. That's it. Now, I guess the question is, why not just see OCTA as one of these, not just as a research group, but as a citizen, right? And the other question is, are you not giving OCTA too much credit and too much power in this conversation?
But they do have a lot of power and credit as well, because many of the policies that the LGUs are doing is based on the OCTA research. And if you think about it, in fact, diba, I mean, when I had my last interview with you, we were discussing Bayanihan, and Bayanihan, in fact, in the Bayanihan 2, we were tackling Bayanihan 3 by then. Bayanihan 2, in fact, believes in data, in data analytics. And in Bayanihan 2, there was an allotment to UP as well as to HTA on data research. So we do believe na kung efficient yung research nila, then well and good, no? But we have to think about the consequences din ng results ng data nila, ng analysis nila. It affects the policy making of the LGUs and also Congress. So we're just assessing if we are relying on the correct institution, and if so, if OCTA is. And
but Congresswoman, isn't that question, let me go back to an earlier question I asked, isn't that a question best put forward to people in government? Isn't that a question that you should be asking yourselves? Isn't that a question that LGU should be asking yourselves? Are we consuming the right questions? Why question OCTA when you should be asking the mayors? Bakit nga ba OCTA pinapakinggan nyo? Why is the burden on OCTA?
One part of the inquiry, in my case, for example, because it's a very general resolution, is if OCTA, how credible is OCTA in the sense that its is it associated with the University of the Philippines, for example? And if it is, then the University of the Philippines is supposed to be an independent. It's supposed to be an independent institution, and then it should be credible enough. But I just for my case, for example, I want to see where their sources are coming from and kung saan galing yung funding nila, for example. So it's not basically about questioning OCTA, just OCTA by itself, pero on how we value data analytics in policy making. Kasi that's something that we have been pushing for since the get-go naman ng Bayanihan 1 and 2 and 3. We have to remember that Congress is not the implementing arm of the government. It's the policy making, and the policy making has taken a backseat in this case in COVID. Kasi
since you're talking, and you keep talking about policy,
we're not. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just want to ask, because you keep using the word policy. We need to know what policy.
We don't
What
get
policy
involved.
are you trying to come up with, or is this an oversight thing? Are you
Correct.
exercising your power of oversight, meaning you're really looking into whether they're using government funds for this, or are you trying? Because I can't figure out what kind of policy you can actually frame with or without OCTA. I mean, why is this so important to establish whether OCTA has been alarmist beyond its role to play, etc., etc.? What policies are you talking about?
Lucci, it's because, as we mentioned earlier, OCTA has been giving out statements based on their findings, and based on these statements, it creates a reaction from the people, and of course from our local chief executives. What we want to know, as I mentioned, we're not saying that they are giving out wrong statistics or wrong data. But at times there is conflict between data released by the DOH and data released by OCTA. And it seems na favorite ngayon ng media yung OCTA. They're always being quoted. OCTA said that there will be a surge. OCTA said that this is the current COVID situation. So they're always being quoted. Kami naman,
Yes, sir.
what we want to find out lang, okay, if we feel that data is accurate, then let's see what methodology are they using kung bakit at times they are in conflict with the DOH. What methodology are they using? Because kagaya nung sinasabi ni Dr. Salvania, bakit sinasabi niya na inaccurate or incomplete yung data na naging basihan to come up with the findings? We just want to understand also, like everyone else. Like if I ask you, do you understand the methodology being used by OCTA? Can you confidently tell us na, yan, naiintindihan namin yung basis?
Yes, sir. Pero sir, something a bit fundamental po kasi there. There's something a bit fundamental there. Can Congress filter any group that wants to express its opinion or its research? Kasi what's to stop, for example, a UST research group from going to the media or from or a UP Manila
we're not
group from
stopping
going to
them.
media and so
We're
on?
not stopping them.
No one is stopping them. We want to get to know them better because if you look at their website, you'd see nothing. Diba? And we all know that they're just a new research group. And for a new research group na ang daming basihan doon, syempre kami bilang mga magabatas, gusto namin makita kung tama ba yung nire-relyan ng ating Metro Manila Council pagdating sa decision making. Kasi dapat holistic yung approach mo, hindi lang naman health ang pinag-uusapan dito, pero pati ekonomiya. So,
Pero ano pong batas ang kakailanganin, no? I
You
just
know-
want to know,
But we
what
need-
law do you
No,
think
sa
you should
akin.
be able to frame from this?
No, we need
Because
to
we're in
get
the
to
middle
know-
of a pandemic,
Aren't you-
and you know,
Ako, my
yeah, we
question
need
is-
all the information we can get, right? So, parang,
no one
I
is
mean,
stopping
even
them.
media,
We want to
Tucci.
clarify. No one is stopping them from releasing the information. But what we just want to know is that is it coming from a reliable source of information? Who are the experts behind OCTA? Because when you look at their website, you won't find.
Yeah, but here's ano,
And that
let's
is what. that is
Oh,
what
but-
track
you want.
record.
but Congresswoman, let's just take it let's take it logically forward. Let's assume you don't
Yeah.
get any answers that you like. Let's assume that na hindi kayo believe sa methodology nila. Oh, let's just put it that way. Hindi kayo believe sa methodology nila. What happens?
You know, we don't intend to censor anyone. We don't intend, just to set things, the record straight. As we, you know, there's freedom of speech, and we recognize that and we honor that. We don't intend to censor anyone. But of course, in this time of pandemic, we want responsible information, responsible statements coming from different groups, whether it be the it comes from the government or from the private
But
sector.
Congressman, what's
As much as
responsible?
possible,
What is a responsible statement?
accurate data.
Yeah, what is
Accurate data
but here's the
that
problem,
will
di ba?
not
Here's the
cause
problem.
panic.
And Congressman, here's the problem. You look at Twitter right now, may bangayan even among the scientists. OCTA is being questioned and challenged by their peers. And it's all par for the course. They accept it. That's part of academic freedom. That's how science works. We have a free scientific research-based community in the Philippines that seems really very, very, very lively and dynamic and wanting to be good citizens to contribute. But in the meantime, this is what people are afraid of. Every time congressmen, every time politicians say, we want you to be responsible and accurate, define for us what is an accurate statement when precisely the scientists are debating this very openly every single day.
You know-
Personally, my worry is that they just say about the cases, but they don't really detail what kind of cases are there. When you say increase, is it severe, is it bad? For me, that's it. Kasi kahit pa paano, hindi naman nila nagta-touch on how many ba recover from those cases.
Yeah, but-
is it
but-
really something that merits it?
But you
Sa
yourself
akin,
noted,
but
you
they
yourself
don't
noted,
use that data
Like-
also
like-
based on hospital
like what you said,
records.
like what you said, even the scientists among themselves, they're debating. Even the scientists among themselves are questioning OCTA. So ibig sabihin yan, as we mentioned, kahit sila merong hindi pagkakasunduan, but from experience, from past experience, kagaya ng sinabi namin kanina, some of our local chief executives are basing their decisions from OCTA. Now, kung among the scientists themselves, hindi sila nagkakasundo and they're questioning the methodology, then with more reason na we want to know, let's have a clear understanding because policies are being made by local chief executive based on the data that you are giving out to the community.
and again, precisely, sir, we understand.
Don't you think
But
that's
that's
a
precisely my
responsible
point.
thing to do?
Why not call MMDA? Why not call the Metro Manila Council? Why not call the LGUs and ask them, kayo, anong methodology? How do you come up with your decisions? Ano yung batayan nyo?
Eventually
But
would do that.
people
Eventually
really,
would do that.
I guess this is the point, sir. People really get jittery when politicians want to bring to a congressional inquiry scientists.
Why would they get jittery? We just want clarity. Ano yung nakakatakot doon? We just want to know ano ba yung methodology. So why would you get jittery? If you don't impute ill motive to it, then there would be nothing wrong.
Would you be comfortable na hindi natin kilala yung isang organization and then doon nababase lang?
First,
we want to be more comfortable.
well,
Kilala.
Congresswoman, first of all, to be fair, it's not true na hindi namin kilala. Secondly, of the things that need to be clarified, you yourself pointed out, napapansin nyo na nag-guest sila sa media every single day. Not just here, across all channels. And if you watch the news programs, they get asked those very questions. They get asked, ano ba yung methodology nyo? Ano yung basis? Was it mild? Was it case? Are you just being alarmist? We just asked them that yesterday. They get asked these questions. The question is,
Okay.
why a congressional
Now, if you can
inquiry?
Ask them also. Because we
So
want
it's
to ask
okay
them
for
also.
media to ask them, but for us, we care?
No, it's
Ganun
not
ba
that.
yun?
The question is,
Because it's
what
like
do you
we're
hope to
inviting
get
them
out of
also.
this?
Because
When you're
You're not already getting
Ah.
from media reports. I have to say, no?
O syempre, iba po ang statements nila sa media, iba rin po ang statements po sa amin. We cannot naman base everything on your interview with them because we have our own way of
Yeah.
asking them questions also. I hope you also respect that because we respect that you want to get to know them. We also, as members of Congress, we want to get to know them better also because dun din kami magbabase ng mga future legislations namin. Diba? I mean, what like Bong said, what makes us different from you, wanting to get to know them better, we cannot just base it based on what you release, diba? We also want to talk to them personally.
I'll tell you kung bakit pinapatulan sila ng media. Ha? First of all, they feel the vacuum there. Walang data analytics tayo from the pandemic. Eh.
So, ibig mo sabihin
Pare-pareho lang
that
yung ano eh.
DOH is not releasing any data with regards to the pandemic?
No
Is that
projections.
what you mean?
No
Kasi sabi
projections.
mo, walang data analytics, so you will rely on
No,
OCTA?
no.
Wala siyang analytics.
Di ba earlier you said
Analytics.
that
Analytics.
they base their data also from the DOH.
Yes, sir.
Exactly. Analytics
Oh.
nga sabi namin.
Yeah,
They
sir.
are projecting na ito ang magiging trend.
Ma'am,
Sa umpisa, hindi naman namin, akala nga namin manghuhula sila nung umpisa eh. But tumama sila ng tumama eh, until the surge noong March and April.
So dahil they were able to convince you,
So you're asking kung bakit
you feel that dapat convinced na rin ang Congress, ganun ba
we're not
yun?
stopping you from probing. You can go ahead.
well,
Oh,
that's why,
yung sa akin, let's not view it as, no, we want to discredit OCTA or put ill motive in what they're doing. That's not, that's the farthest thing from our mind.
Like you
Like
said.
kayo, it took some time before you were convinced. Kami naman, we also want to be convinced that, we're relying on the correct data, and that's it.
Pare-pareho nga.
Sir, let's go back to the
can I
earlier
just-
Go ahead,
question.
Congresswoman
What
Garin.
happened
Sorry,
kung
Congresswoman Garin.
hindi-
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just want to add that it's not, kasi it's not just about OCTA per se. I mean, as everybody agrees here, data analytics is the most important thing it's the most important thing for us these days during COVID times. So if you say that OCTA is correct and they're doing the right job, then why can't government do it, diba? So
Yeah.
that's also the purpose
Congresswoman,
that's also the
Congresswoman,
purpose of the...
let me address two things there. No?
Kung kaya ng OCTA, but hindi
Yeah.
kaya ng
Aba,
gobyerno natin.
Congresswoman, let me
So
just...
we might as well legislate on it and do data analytics funded and supported by the government.
Let me just say two quick things about that. First is, kami rin hindi expert. Neither are we saying na sila ang tama, kaya sila ang nai-interview parate.
Yeah.
We actually like a lot of things about them. They're transparent, they're easy to ask, they don't mind if they get challenged, and they do talk about their methodologies when
Alright.
asked. Secondly, it's not the probe itself really that we're questioning.
Yeah.
Ako personally, what I'm worried about is not so much when politicians say we want to look into something scientific. It's when when words like it has to be responsible and it has to be accurate, that's when I get concerned. Because that treads along the lines of freedom of thought, academic freedom, and free speech. When congressmen start, when congressmen start saying that part of the objective, because Congressman, it's two different things. It's one thing to say, gusto lang namin sila makilala. But you've also said that gusto rin kasi namin masigurado na accurate at responsible ang kanilang data.
Of course, because we're basing, decisions are being based on data that they give out. So we want it to
But
be
that goes back to the
accurate
question,
data.
what if
Diba?
some
We
other
don't
independent
want
research group
policies or
wants to
decisions
release
be based
data?
on the wrong data.
And let me assure you, walang objective dito na patahimikin sila. There's no such thing. At the end of the day, like Sharon said, pwedeng sasabihin namin yung government, ba't kayo wala kayong ganitong analytics katulad sa OCTA?
Tama.
It can go either way.
In fact,
Diba?
even
talagang
OCTA,
it's really us, parang, kung like sabi nyo, kayo, nagdududa kayo sa OCTA, nung nakilala nyo sila, okay pala sila. Then it will turn out the same way with us. And then we called attention of DOH and other statisticians that we're hiring. o bakit wala kayong ganitong data, just like OCTA? Why don't you work with OCTA? It can go that way because all our hearings naman, sometimes pupunta siya sa tamang direksyon.
In fact, this morning I was interviewed. I was with Dr. Ranjit, and he welcomes it.
Yeah.
He wants to share their methodology. He wants the legislators to understand what they're using. So I don't, ako nga, I can't understand kung ano yung big issue about it.
Actually, nagulat kami na masyado siyang big deal kasi talagang ang ano lang naman is what we want to invite them, we want to get to know them, and at the same time, if we can adopt what they're doing, then why not use it for the whole country and then improve natin yung the way they deliver the message para lang makakagamit natin ng tama.
Because you know, if it can be shown.
Can I just add lang na, I mean, I do really respect the integrity of the scientists. We have all the data analytics that we have, but also we also have to remember this is COVID times and this is an exceptional time. And in whatever, whether it's OCTA or whatever, OCTA 1, 2, 3, or whatever kind of data analytics institution, then there's a certain amount of a borderline of social responsibility there. So, kaya nga, like Bong said, it also affects the policy making. So it's good to assess these things right now para malaman din natin. Kasi I think we haven't done enough in the past year on data analytics, and we need to beef it up. And OCTA is the best example na kung kaya pala ng private, why can't the public, the government do it likewise? So I think it's the right time for us to check on OCTA and maybe copy what they're doing for the government to do it.
And we're actually happy because OCTA is very open to that. Actually, open sila ng interviews. They said they're open and they'll gladly share their methodologies with us.
Okay. Congresswoman.
Yun lang nga yung data analytics natin na you know, that gives out more or less accurate results, di ba? So we're not against OCTA actually. We're actually want to see what they're doing well and maybe copy it for the government to do as well.
Okay. Congresswomen HERRERA-DY and Garin and Congressman Suntay, maraming salamat po.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And
Thank
please,
you very much.
yeah, and we will continue this conversation. Please stay with us. The Chiefs will be right back with OCTA Research. Welcome back, the Chiefs here on One News. Now joining us, Father Nick Austriaco of OCTA Research. Good evening, Father Nick.
Good evening to all.
Good evening, Father.
Good evening, Father.
And we would like to acknowledge our part here. We would apologize to the public and our viewers as well if we have not clarified this well enough. Also, in all the weeks that we've been having you, Father Nick, sino nga ba kayo?
So we basically are an independent team of data analytics brought together by the circumstances of COVID. So one of the things you have to understand is historically, OCTA began with a team of 8 UP scholars, which is why it was OCTA. And I was not part of that originally, but over the course of the few months, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, They found out that I was doing modeling because of a paper that I had submitted to the Philippine Journal of Science. And so they invited me, and over the course of the pandemic, we have invited colleagues of similar mindset who are willing to contribute their expertise to the benefit of the common good for the Filipino people in order to get together, in order to talk about the data. And I think that, when I woke up this morning in Germany and heard about the impending investigation, I was somewhat, I was somewhat amused at first. I mean, first, I believe I speak for my colleagues and my friends. We welcome this opportunity to speak about how we do our science. And I think it's really important for our colleagues to understand, for example, how we calculate the reproduction number. My only concern is that I'm not sure if our politicians, especially the congresspersons that you just interviewed, would have the background for us to explain to them in great detail what we do. So I'm not quite sure. I would love to speak to them. I would like to explain all that we do. And I know we are ready and we're preparing to do that. But one of the challenges is that how do we explain to a congressperson, a congressman or congresswoman, the absolute details of a very scientific study when he or she does not have the appropriate background? So what it will eventually mean is we're going to end up talking to scientists who advise Congress. And so you are now falling back on the scientific peer review process itself. So I am about to publish a paper on modeling vaccination rollouts, and it's taken me several months because I had to send it in to a journal. It was sent to reviewers. The reviewers reviewed it. I've had the last month, me and my colleagues have had a chance to respond to the scientific objections, and we are doing that, and we hope to resubmit the manuscript in the next few days. I am trying to imagine how this kind of scientific peer review process will work out in the context of a congressional investigation. And, it's interesting that your guests in the early half of the hour were pointing out that they just want to get to know us. One of the things that that is imprinted into me after 25 years in the United States is that we are very acutely aware of power. And when we talk to other scientists, we know that their power on us is limited. But when politicians especially initiate an interrogation, an investigation, the imbalance of power is very clear. And so the concern is that the peer review process that we normally will go through will be much more difficult and challenging to communicate to the average Filipino. We are doing our best. I mean, one of the things, as hopefully you've been seeing over the year, is that we don't simply talk about what our recommendations are. We present all the numbers, we present all the data. There are concerns been raised about the reproduction number, but one of the reasons why I trust the work of my colleague and my friend, Dr. Guido David, is because early on, he and I sat down and he explained all of the methodology that he undertook. And I, as a molecular biologist, but also as someone who's involved in modeling, was able to go back there and look at the trends. One of the things that everyone knows when we do modeling is that no model is perfect. In fact, they say all models are wrong, some are helpful. And one of the things that hopefully you have seen, and something that you emphasized to your earlier guests, is that our models are good enough to forecast what will happen in the Philippines in the short run. And when people ask me why do people listen to OCTA? I'm talking about not just my relatives. I have strangers. One of the things that the strangers tell me is that we have come to understand that your forecasts actually are able to see what will happen. And they point especially to the surge in March and April, right? And at the beginning of March, we were calling for a circuit breaker lockdown, as we were calling for it last week. And in that sort of circumstances, the government chose not to do so. and we know what happened. Now, one of the things that people have asked us is, why didn't the DOH data analytics team make the same projections that they're making this week, right? So this week,
because that seems to be the trigger.
This is the
Father,
trigger.
no? I'll have
It
to
was
tell
the
you,
trigger.
that was the trigger. Now, when Dr. Edsel Salvania said you were basing your projections
On
on
old data.
incomplete and erroneous data, can you explain that?
So
At least ordinary people like us.
So one of the shortcomings and limitations of data during a pandemic is that the quality of the data is not the best because people are terrified, people are dealing with a crisis. So it takes several weeks for us to improve the quality of the data. And one of his primary concerns is that OCTA, as in principle, relies on the reproduction number. And you know about this. You ask us about the reproduction number, and he makes the argument that because the data has shortcomings in a 2-week period, attempting to make forecasts based on a reproduction number will inevitably be inaccurate. Now, one of the things that we say over and over again is that we're looking at trends. So what that means is that if the R value is only 80% accurate today, because of the shortcomings of the data, one of the things you discover is that it is always 80% inaccurate. So the trend is still the same. We can look at the trend. So if 2 weeks ago, the R was 1.1, and now it is 1.6, in truth, the R back then may be 1.0 to 1.2, and the R now may be between 1.5 and 1.7. And yes, looking back in hindsight, there is an error, but what we don't really focus immediately on whether or not it's 1.1 or 1.15. We are saying that in the last 2 weeks, the R has moved up from 1.1 to 1.6.
By so many percent.
So that percentage difference is going to be the same regardless of the error, because the error remains consistent because the data is always flawed for 2 weeks. And so this is why we are able to make the kind of predictions we make. The forecasts that we make are based on trends.
Father,
Yes.
Yeah, unfortunately, I mean, the topic tonight is we know how it feels as journalists. You don't intend to be the story, but unfortunately, right now it is about you. And also, in all fairness, also I do want to say we have interviewed these ladies and gentlemen from Congress here in the past. I do want to say. I think they can handle your presentations. As well as you've presented in LGUs, certainly, as they said, that's true. They handle data, they speak with scientists. So I do want to say that as well. We have the highest respect for them. Certainly, if they're the representative of that inquiry, we have no doubt they have the capacity to do that. But I want to get to that point. Unfortunately, the topic tonight is about you. So I do want to raise that one question. Apart from who you are and your credentials, who's funding you? I have heard that question from other people as well. It's something that's been brought up by the congresswomen earlier. Are you affiliated with UP? Are you affiliated with any educational institution? If not, then who's funding you?
So we are an independent institution. So we are not formally affiliated with any academic institutions. Now, what has happened realistically is we have collaborated with Quezon City. And Quezon City, I'm sure Mayor Joy Belmonte will not have a problem, provides us a stipend for our services to the city because we meet with her on a weekly basis and we do data analytics. Now, what's interesting is her team also does data analytics, and they do amazing data analytics. And I work closely with the manager, the director of the CESU program in QC. But we are an independent accountability for the city. And so we can compare our analysis And we also, in a sense, are a neutral observer because we're not really close. So in terms of finances, in terms of my finances, first of all, I have a vow of poverty. So I don't have a salary. So we do get a certain amount from Quezon City of every 3 to 4 months for our services, and that goes straight to the Dominican Order. It goes to the student brothers. We don't have any other independent sourcing. Basically, I'm doing this for free. I'm doing this for free because I was given the opportunity to serve the people, the Filipino people, and I've been away from home for 30 years. And I decided that this is something that I wanted to do to give back. That God had given me these skills, and I wanted to give back. Now,
Well, Father, kasi,
yes.
well, there was one congresswoman who raised the possibility that the group may have received up to 15 million from Bayanihan
Yes.
too. Although it's not really very clear if that congresswoman was referring to OCTA itself or to the university
Yes.
to which some people have linked OCTA. So at least from the national government po, has OCTA gotten anything from Bayanihan too, for example?
So OCTA per se, as in me per se, no. But OCTA is some of my friends and colleagues are also professors at the University of the Philippines, and they're also involved in data analytics professionally as faculty members at UP. So what will happen is that they, as individuals, have received funding from the government to establish data analytics at the university for the university and for the university's activities. But I, as a member of OCTA, have never received a single peso from Bayanihan 2 because I personally am not affiliated with the University of the Philippines.
Yes, Father.
So
Well, that's clear.
we have to separate the two. There's the OCTA part. This is all those of us who are working on the pandemic, and then there's the part that is
Where
where
they're employees
some of
of
our
UP.
friends are working at UP, and so they are in fact getting funding for the data analytics center at UP.
Father, in fact, just a day or so ago, OCTA came up with a political survey. It's an election survey. And it came up with a list of candidates that, and their chances in the elections, if elections were to be held today. I mean, I'm just wondering, are you in effect something like SWS? I mean, because that's what's clear to most.
Yeah, so
Filipinos.
thank you for that question. Again, this is a contingency of history. So OCTA has roots before COVID. And when OCTA was established before COVID, it was established with the hopes of providing sentiment analysis and data analytics on the political sphere, the political scene of the Philippines, which is why my friend Professor Ranjit Rai is part of the group.
Yes.
And so he and Guido together began to set up this team that was supposed to respond to the political movements of the Philippines. Now, COVID intervened. And so historically what happened is that they chose to use the same intellectual resources of OCTA and pivoted it to COVID-19. In the same way that I, as a cancer biologist, pivoted my research to a yeast vaccine. Everyone changed what they were doing to respond to the global crisis. Now, unfortunately, and I've actually made a point to my friends this earlier today, there is now an entanglement of the two. And I have proposed to my colleagues that for now, during the course of the pandemic, we may choose to step aside from the political side just to make the boundaries really clear, right? So it's historically, it was established to respond to the political soap opera that is the Philippines. The COVID intervened. And unfortunately, there were projects already in place. So those kept continuing. And so there is very easy for misunderstanding. And so I proposed to the team, our group, we are still discussing it and deliberating on it. It may be a time now for a pause for us to completely focus in on COVID, to make sure that we don't have any conflicts of interest that people may perceive, because our work is inherently political in that it serves the common good.
Okay. Father Nick Austriaco, and you will be hearing more from Father Nick Austriaco, no doubt, in OCTA, in
Yes.
future episodes. Once again, we'd like to thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Father.
Thank you,
God
Father.
bless.
And that will
Yes.
lead us to the things that OCTA looks into. We will still talk about about COVID, a quick situationer. Now joining us, Dr. Maricar Limpin, President of the Philippine College of Physicians. Good evening, Dr. Limpin.
Good evening, Doc.
Good evening po.
Good evening din po sa inyong lahat.
Hi, good evening po. Sige, let's talk about COVID. Over the past few days, we've been talking about hospital capacity, the ICU and caseload situations. But every time we talk about that, everybody leads us to a discussion about human resource. That human resource is really a weak link here. From your perspective, ma'am, I mean, kamusta po ba ang ano natin, ang human resource heading into the lockdown?
Siyempre, no, ngayon during COVID, nakakakita na rin na naman kami ng mga increasing number of COVID cases among the healthcare workers, no? Pero hindi siya doon sa level na katulad nung naranasan natin nung nakaraan, no? Nito lang na March and also last year. So, many of the government hospitals and even the private, medyo okay pa yung healthcare workers natin, no? Although we have to realize na many of the private, maybe the private hospitals, particularly the small ones, marami sa kanilang mga, lalo na yung mga nurses, no, medyo nag-resign, maraming mga nag-resign because number one, of course, there are greater opportunities abroad, no, medyo open ang recruitment ng mga nurses, and then secondly, medyo may fear, no, na pag nag-stay sila in the hospital, medyo baka magkakaroon sila ng COVID, and to think na ang sweldo nila sa mga small hospitals na yan ay medyo maliit din.
So among the physicians, doctor, you welcome this 2-week lockdown. It's a circuit breaker and it's supposed to help as well the healthcare workers.
Yeah, definitely, no. It's a welcome thing, and sabi ko nga even before last week, na tinatanong before even the president announced the lockdown, sinasabi namin kung kakayanin ng gobyerno ng lockdown, then of course we will actually welcome it kasi it's definitely an effective strategy, to contain the pandemic. But then again, I'd like to emphasize na these lockdowns are really temporary measures, no. We need to put into place more permanent and more effective measures. I've been discussing this many times, several times, but medyo hanggang ngayon more than a year na tayo, but we haven't really seen effective permanent measures to contain the pandemic, no. So yun ang nagiging problema natin.
When you say effective measures na hindi pa natin nagagawa, ano ba yun, ma'am? Kasi para ang feeling ng lahat, paikot-ikot na lang sa mask, sa anong tawag to, yung face shield, diba? Tapos physical distancing, tapos lockdown. Ano pa ba? Kasi contact tracing, hindi naman kanila yon, diba? Gobyerno naman yon kung tutuusin. Is that where we're lacking?
That number one, let me just make sure na when it comes to the health protocols, the face mask, the physical distancing, these are things na parang seemingly we are all doing, pero if you look at it, we're not doing it correctly. Okay? And we are not maintaining the compliance to the health protocols at all times. Kasi kapag nagbago ang community quarantine measures natin, kunyari nag-relax tayo, naging GCQ, relax din, pati ang behavior natin, no? So, that is where the problem is. But more than that, I think may problem din talaga tayo doon sa implementation ng maraming health measures like contact tracing. No, there is really a problem, and this is something that only the government can do. Kaya nga sinasabi namin na dapat yung mga local chief executives, tama na yung yung parang pasikatan ba sila o yung iba matitigas ang ulo. They just need to follow what the IATF is recommending to them. Parang nagkakanya-kanya kasi yung mga LGUs. So we need to have better contact tracing, and that contact tracing must be standardized. Kasi if we don't do this, no, hindi natin matitrace yung mga na-expose, hindi natin ma-isolate yan, no? And therefore, at hindi, syempre, walang testing din. So, mas dadami yung mga taong magkakaroon ng infection. So, yun ang malaking problema. And then, we have very loose border control. Depende, no? Lalo na dito sa pagpasok sa NCR. Pero, di ba, ngayon may mga issuances na you cannot just, enter and get out of NCR without yung mga requirements, no? Which is actually a welcome thing. Dapat mas ginawa natin ito noon pa, pero medyo nahuhuli nga talaga tayo.
Okay. Dr. Maricar Limpin, as always po, maraming
Thank
salamat.
you,
Yeah,
Doc.
Thank you, Doc.
And thank you, and stay
Ingat po
safe.
kayo.
Thank you po.
And that will be all for this special edition of The Chiefs. We hope what was discussed here will keep the conversation going. Before we go, a reminder to our viewers, mask on, wash hands, and stay safe, Philippines. I'm Robbie Alampay.
I'm Ami Pamintuan of the Philippine Star.
I'm Lucy Cruz Valdez of News 5.
I'm Ed Lingao, and we are One News.